Balaji Vishwanathan, thank you for joining India Global Business for this conversation. I was looking for various ways in which to describe you best. So I settled for kind of you are the CEO and founder of Invento Robotics. You build robots, and that's your passion. And I think at some point you probably believe that robots should be equated on the same platform as human beings at some point of time when everything aligns itself. You're also very widely sought after individual on Quora, where people queue up to seek your views on a number of issues. So we are very privileged that you took the time off to speak with us. So thank you for giving us this time.
Thanks, Robin. Thanks for the opportunity to connect with your viewers.
So I was just wondering, I wanted to get into the robotics later on, but I just very fascinated by your stint and stay and journey through Quora. Tell us about this journey in the world of Quora, and what inspired you to become so focused on vigorous engagement on that platform?
So it happened out of chance. About 9 years ago in 2012, so I wrote a couple of answers over there. At that point, I was running a startup at that point too. So it was a very good startup hub. But there was nothing related to the other topics outside the narrow this thing of the Silicon Valley. So I wanted to start educating people about what is India, the history and so on. So I wrote a couple of answers that got a bit popular. So since then, I thought that as a medium for people to understand their own country and understand a variety of topics. So it is for me, it's a fascinating one, similar to what the ancient India in my imagination is. So people are discussing, people debating and going through philosophy. That's how I got fascinated by Quora, especially in the earliest days.
That's a very fascinating world to live in, because there's so much vigorous engagement of views there. Just deviating slightly, let us come to Mitra the robot. Your thoughts behind the formation of Invento Robotics. You are the CEO and founder of this company. It's making waves all over the world. So some very high-profile people have interacted with Mitra and you. Why do you think robotics is the way forward in this world that we currently live in, especially in the time of the pandemic and other issues that are going to be probably mankind is going to be dealing with, and robotics comes to the forefront? I would love to hear your views on that.
Absolutely, and it's always a controversial topic when people think of robots. So they go into two extremes. One like a Terminator kind of this thing, will it take away my jobs? Will it be taking over humanity and so on? On the other extreme, is it going to be a toy and thing? So in between that, in a way, it is going to be like a PC. So your PC changed your world substantially. But at the same time, it did not take you into Star Trek this thing. So it is still going to be a lot of it is you might be using for more mundane purposes, but it is going to substantially change the world economy in a couple of ways. The reason why we need it at this point, I'll tell you, in healthcare, even before the pandemic hit, world was short of over 6 million nurses and about 3 million doctors. This is a huge problem. And as we age, there are it is becoming impossible to find human assistants to completely serve us. So that's the very big problem area, and this has been my passion for a long time, and this is my topic of my PhD thesis too. How do we use robots on senior care? So that's sort of a core thing for me, and this the world needs it, and there are plenty of problems in the world right now, whether it is handling, helping our senior citizens, or cleaning up our oceans, or making our the sewage systems in urban world work, or dealing with the terrorist threats and so on. A huge amount of things where robots can substantially alter the way things are done. So it is going to, and the technologies, underlying technologies that are required are very, very close to getting to fruition. So what was not possible 50 years ago now it is possible, and the world right now needs robots more than any time ever.
It's really fascinating because for regular people venturing into this thought process or even into this world, it throws up so many questions. What made you form the company Invento Robotics? What inspired you? I'm sure the reasons that you've given were one, but what were the other reasons that inspired you?
Absolutely. So there are two parallel sort of the thing that came into. So one of them was my core passion that we need to bring manufacturing into the thing. So that has been my I've been sort of evangelizing this concept for a long time. For India to become a developed nation, the only way it can be is by unlocking manufacturing. There is no way you can have Infosys and Googles and Microsofts employ 1 billion people. So it has always been my contention. I've written about this topic for many years, and I've been quite disappointed that the manufacturing done in India is still falling huge. We are quite under doing our potential. So my first thing was we want to manufacture something out of India. That was our that was a thing that we the first thought out. It could be robots, it could be 3D printers, it could be anything, but we want to manufacture something out of India, tangible product, something that we can build for the global market. So that is one key part of sort of life ambition and mission in some sense, doing manufacturing. And then particularly with robotics itself, so I have during my research at University of Maryland, I've done work on robotics and AI. So my primary research was on that. So in some sense, I was robotics always was in the back of my mind, but I could have got onto any kind of manufacturing. When we started out with, we tried a couple of different types. We set it up as a maker space. We tried robots, we tried 3D printers and so on. And finally, robotics was the one that clicked.
Now we obviously in a scenario where robotics market in India is expected to grow by 20%, according to my data, but please feel free to correct me, between 2017 and 2025. That's what the estimates are saying. You obviously were optimistic, but it seems like the whole of India now is becoming optimistic also in this field. What brings about such optimistic predictions with robotics especially?
There is both a demand side and there is a supply side going on. On the supply side, many of the technologies that were not ready. So for instance, a conversational AI, how do we make machines talk to us in a more natural way? That was not possible even 5 years ago. Now we are getting closer and closer to that reality, at least in few contexts. It might not be able to do an open-ended context like how I'm doing with you, but in many of the structured contexts, dealing with a concierge or in a hospital, many of those things now the natural language has evolved quite a bit. So a lot of improvements that has happened on the computer vision and so on. So the underlying technologies that were required to build robots that have all achieved kind of maturity only in the last 2-3 years. Even 3 years ago, your face recognition software or your LiDARs required to move the robot, they were all in a very, very different state. From 2018 onwards, there's a big shift in multiple technologies. So that is on the supply side. So even if the demand were there 10 years ago, we could not have built it. So the supply had to come. And then on the demand side, what is happening is there's this increasing pressure on because we are not finding enough good nurses. There's a lot of things we call the dull, dirty, dangerous jobs, the DDD jobs, for which companies are not finding enough people to get. So this has been on the demand side. So both supply and demand, it is coming to sort of the thing closer and unlocking a massive market.
The pandemic has obviously created a lot of opportunities now in health tech.
Absolutely.
And tying in with that obviously has been the Make in India philosophy that now the Indians have embraced in manufacturing and reinventing and innovation. Did you go through your fair share of challenges before you embarked on this journey to offer Mitra to the world?
Absolutely, crazy challenges. It's not just as a past tense, present tense, and this thing. So it's always a there are a whole bunch of challenges that are there. To start out with, India does not have a hardware ecosystem, so to speak. So to build everything, so we had to build our molds with 3D printers and then get that this thing mold to fiberglass and so on, and then have the chassis built, the metal work and so on, and then building the PCBs. So lot of different pieces in building a robot. And India's ecosystem was quite weak. So we were advised by a lot of people to go to China and do that. And I've been to China multiple times. But even in China, the suppliers I've talked to, they were asking me how to set up shop in India, because increasingly China has become quite expensive. Regulatory process has become more this thing, and then the land has become quite expensive and so on. So I saw that when the Chinese themselves are looking at trying to venture out of this thing. So it is a good opportunity. And eventually we came back and said, we are going to build that ecosystem slowly in India. And that was a long, hard road. And getting the right kind of talent. So in the earlier days, so we hired both hardware engineers and software engineers for the robot. So sometimes the hardware engineers in the earliest days would ask me, now, would I get promoted to software at some point? Software is not a promotion, it is a parallel one. But in India, it's often our mindset that doing software is more superior to doing hardware. So that makes hiring quality talent become quite hard. And then the capital for it, we are in a hardware industry, capital intensive industry. Capital is extremely scarce, especially when we started out in 2016-17. The banks were all pained by this Nirav Modi and all those guys. And so since they got pained by their own lax policies 10 years ago, so they were biting everyone they could. So extremely scarce when it comes to capital availability. So we had to pledge our property to get mudra loans, but we had to pledge our home and so on. So that is something that we had to do. So capital was scarce. And then customer education, we had to do it. We were creating a whole new market. And then dealing with customs and so on. So this is a hardware company has to deal with 10 times more challenges. I always joke that when it comes to software, the software guys were able to succeed quite a bit because they built a parallel government in some sense. So like an Infosys or a Wipro or a TCS, they are a country of their own in some sense. So they have their own transportation systems. They have their own electricity power distribution system. They have their own roads. Internet, they have their own communication systems, and pretty much. So in essence, your Infosys campus is pretty much almost their own country, and the SEZ laws allows them to have the better treatment and so on. But then you can do that for software. In hardware, you need far more power. So you cannot you have to rely on countries' power systems, and you have to do supply chain. You have to move things around the country. So you need to rely on the nation's ports and other infrastructure. You need the nation's security. So a software, you were able to create a virtual country within you. And so they were Infosys or Wipro, they could avoid the chaos of India to some extent. Whereas in hardware, you have to rely on all these things. That makes the process quite hard. But the thing is, we survived, and there were many moments where we could have gone out of business. So we just joke internally how many times we have come quite close. So even a year ago we were running close, short of money because all our existing customers. So we were selling our robots to retail and banking and airports and so on. All our customers were the first one to be hit by the thing. So in March, it was like hitting a brick wall, coming to zero in the thing. And as a hardware company, we had a lot of huge fixed expenses to manage, and we cannot do most of the work remotely. We had to be in the plant doing all that. So we had to reinvent ourselves and this thing. So it has been a very interesting testing challenge in that sense.
I'm sure it has, the way you have put it out, and I'm sure there have been many lessons that you have learned along the way. But please take us to the current scenario and the future power of AI, especially in not a global context, because we know how important it is, but slowly tech and AI are coming to the fore in India. You are one of the pioneers of it now. Where are we now when placed in a global context? And what more needs to be done to broaden out this technology across multiple fields for India to make that impact?
Absolutely. So at this point now we are becoming a global company. We are manufacturing and building that engineering in India, and now we are exporting to 5 countries, including US, Australia, and Singapore. So we are slowly becoming sort of coming out of India and then building it for the world. Sort of make in India for the world is our current motto and tagline, like taken from the government's own objective. So what we see is India has a very good advantage at this point, because we have an underlying software power, which across the world people recognize the power of our software engineers and technical minds. And then we also have a cost advantage compared to China. And we have a much better regulatory thing than China or Bangladesh and so on. We have a better legal infrastructure. We have better English communication and so on. So in a lot of ways, this is a good time for Indian hardware companies, IoT, robotics and so on, to come and imagine at the global level, because we have advantages that China now doesn't, because the trust level for Indian technologies is now better vis-a-vis China. And as well, we have like many of our underlying things coming together. So in AI, there is a whole bunch of things that we can do. I can walk you through one example of how AI in a hospital is changing. So I can walk you through with our robot what we are building. So currently what is happening is, so some of the doctor friends joke with me that I've become a glorified data entry operator in that thing. Like most of my time I'm collecting data, entering into this electronic health record system and getting this thing. Like doctors, especially in the US and Europe, their work has become more of paperwork than actually diagnosis. This has become over the last 10-15 years. It has become that way, putting significant cost pressures on the system, because the doctors are the most expensive resource in this whole thing. And also data collection is very, very limited. So for instance, if you have to figure out when the virus first started, was it in October? This thing, was it November, December, January? When did it actually start? There's very little data going forth. So that's what we come in. I'll give you a scenario in the newer system. So you walk in front of a robot. The robot will ask your permission to take your picture, recognize you, and then it will be able to identify whether you are an existing patient or a new patient. If you're a existing patient, then we'll be asking for what is your why have you come? So let's say you're saying I'm having a severe headache. Then it will be asking you questions very, very related to that. Now, how long has the headache been? Which parts of the pains and so on? And then it will be doing a scoring. That's the first part. And Mitra will be doing with all its body. It will be using the emotional part of the eyes. It will be doing hands and so on. So it will use its full body to communicate, because that we have seen is conveys empathy and so on. So if I be like this and then communicate with you, after 2 minutes you will get freaked out because you expect motion when I speak. The same thing happens. So it will use its full body to communicate, get this thing, and use its AI to score initially. What kind of things could be? Second, it will be using its devices on board. So we have stethoscopes, pulse oximeters, temperature sensor, weight scale measurement, height measurement, and so on. So it'll use all its data to actually get the live data from the patient, the vitals and so on. So that is the second portion of the robot's capability. The third part is to ask the patient, hey, do you have an X-ray report or a lab report on something? So the patient says, so it will show a QR code to upload this thing. So you can just hit your email to address, so you can send it. Now you have all the data, and we also run analysis on that thing. So the robot will do the analysis. Now the doctor is sent with all this thing. So the scoring based on the patient's conversation. Then that's all the symptoms and so on. It's there. All the vitals, it's there. The doctor can hear the stethoscope, can even replay and then visually see what is there. And then also all the reports are there. Again, robot will try to analyze whether there are any issues in that thing. Then the doctor sees the patient through the robot itself. Doctor can actually use multiple cameras. They can move the camera of the robot, and then they can use a side camera and so on to see the patient. Now, with all that thing, now we can make a quick diagnosis in a much shorter time, and then they can say, okay, they can enter the drugs and prescription. The robot will print it out. The patient gets it. This process now for the doctor, it becomes like about 2/3 shorter. So in a third of their current diagnosis time, they can do that. It's the first part. Now, if you can do that at a third of that time, the queues for this thing comes significantly down. So if the doctors can become 3 times more productive, what happens is your queues become 9 10 shorter. If you have to wait like 3 days to get an appointment, it could be like in an hour you can get an appointment. So your patient, this thing could become so much shorter that at some point it could become like an ATM. I can walk in, get this thing done, and then come out of it. I don't have to. I cannot do all this thing, and it'll be the same quality as if I'm going there, because it's taking all the vitals, taking all the questions, doing all the analysis. So that is for the productivity improvement and so on with the AI. But the second key thing is all this data of the symptoms and so on. It all the metadata goes through the governments. Governments can do analysis on this thing. So there are people who have complained of headache and this thing, and they have been to this thing. And there are 20 cases live right now happening in, like, say, Mysore, and then 25 in Mangalore that is happening. So there is a trend and pattern. So now let us look at this. Rather than waiting for months to know that there is a pandemic or there is some problem out there, live real this thing, because these robots are collecting data, and in a secured way, it is all maintaining that for the government. This thing to get the patient's name and phone number and all those things won't be there, but it will be the patient's metadata. How many people have had this symptom? How many people have this symptom also had this thing will come in. So what we see is, like, doctors become more efficient. For patients, it becomes a much better delight, and they can go to a doctor anywhere. So for instance, in one of our cases, a doctor is sitting 5,000 kilometers away, and still he can deal with it because he has license to practice both in India and the US. So he can sit out of the US and still be able to deal with the Indian patient. So you get to access world-class physicians, and you get to use the data in a far smarter way. So that is a glimpse of what the robotics can do for healthcare in the future.
When people go to doctors, it's that the human element, the faith and the trust. It's a big thing, because, as you said, when you see a robot standing in front of you, you could get freaked out. Did you and your team, when visualizing this whole journey, factor in what happens to the human element, and how do you address that and make the patient feel more at ease?
Absolutely. This is a big problem. In fact, this is the one reason why this same solution had not worked 3 years ago. So we had the same solution to hospitals. There's a problem, and but what they were, the regulators and the patients would be open for it. So what pandemic has done is made it easier on both the patient side and the regulatory side. So on the patient side, so given a choice between going to a crowded hospital with hundreds of other sick patients around and a healthcare professional who's dealing with COVID people all the time, or a less crowded environment where you're dealing with a robot and not with potentially another sick person. Probably 50% of the people might choose the second one, although the human element is lesser. But at this point, human element in some cases it is not as the same, because you do not know whether the healthcare professional might be carrying a virus or not. So and you don't want to be in a place with a crowded sick patients for a longer time, and you don't want to wait 3 days to get an appointment because the healthcare systems are quite overburdened. So what COVID has done is it started changing patients' behavior. So now they are there's a trade. Life is trade-off. So I can go to this thing. Okay, yeah, I may not get the human touch, but I might. I'm also not going to contract a virus from this thing. So it is bit more. And same thing, regulators also more open, because now we are reducing the burdens on the hospital. Regulators are also more open to giving the permission. What now happens is the data now it becomes the robot becomes smarter and smarter. This is what compared to your thing. So again, when any of your tools, your Netflix or Amazon, everything, as it becomes smarter, like 3-4 times after going there, after let's say in about 4-5 months, we are done with the pandemic, the vaccine is able to do that thing. So by the time you might have gone to the doctor 2-3 times, so you would have already known how to use this thing, and then the robot also already has learned a bunch of things with you. Now you might be more comfortable dealing with it, just as you are more comfortable searching on Google as opposed to asking a librarian. So your behavior change happens, and you also see that the things is becoming smarter and smarter. And it is going to have far less errors than the human doctors, because doctors under a lot of pressure, so they actually miss asking a lot of critical questions. I'll give you an example, like migraine. To really ascertain whether you have a migraine or not, the doctors have to ask about 65 questions to rule out all the other type of headaches. But then doctors are humans; they cannot be, for each patient they cannot ask 65 questions and then go through. What happens is doctors skip a bunch of this thing, and that leads to more errors. So whereas a robot is can be expected to follow the SOP all the time. So as the patient see that, okay, this is now learning about me, it is reducing my queue time substantially, and it is also reducing the error in my diagnosis. So then the tables get turned the other way. So that is what is happening. So the pandemic has become a catalyst in changing the behavior. The technology has been there 2 years ago too, but what has happened is patients' behavior has changed. Once the behavior is there, then it becomes a virtuous cycle. Patients become more and more comfortable. Then they can also tell you your thing, okay, you can go to this thing in 5 minutes, you can come out of it rather than waiting 5 hours to get this appointment. Then as more patients say that, then the system also gets smarter and smarter. Then the AI gets used for better diagnosis. So that virtuous cycle, the catalyst is this pandemic.
In your disruptive and out of the box way of thinking, how far do you think that robotics can go? If I ask you to use your imagination, which you have already used, how far do you think, where would we land up with robotics in the end?
What time frame?
Let's say in the next decade.
Okay, so in the next 10 years, by 2030, what would happen is we see robots as a very common place in homes, doing a multitude of things. So already, some of the homes are having the robotic vacuum cleaner, although with limited success in some sense. But these the new vacuum cleaners and the floor cleaners are going to get far more effective, and these are going to talk with each other. So there is going to be a kitchen robot that is going to assist you whether you are going to make a roti or this thing, and then it is also going to spend time with your children, engaging on physical games. So what if you could play chess but not with your screen? Right now children are in front of the screen all the time. So your option is either as parents you skip your work and play with your children, or you give them the screen and their eyes. You saying, what if robots can engage, play in the more natural way. That is children and adults, the elderly care, the robots would be doing at home. So I imagine about 8 to 10 robots at a home doing all these things, interacting with each other, taking care of the security, taking care of the children, taking care of the elderly, whether moving the elderly or bringing them food. So that's all possible in this decade. I'm not talking about 50 years from now. In this decade, it is possible once users start imagining. And so there must be some adjustments in the home that we have to make. Again, for any technology. So when the TVs first came, you have to change the structure of your living room. So all the furnitures started looking towards the TV. Similarly, there must be a lot of changes that we would do. But once we do that, we could have a multitude of robots taking care of the thing. I believe that the quality of life that it could bring in could be substantially more, and also better health. I believe it can bring in. So the one simple example of children not doing this thing, it could be playing catch up and all those things, but then playing with a robot instead of playing with a screen.
Balaji, my final question to you. You are now relocating to DC. You What lies ahead of you and Mitra in terms of searching new challenges and new boundaries? Where are you going in this journey now that you're relocating to DC? Well, I'm sure you'll have a footprint in India as well. But please,
absolutely. So what I see is, so US healthcare system. So I spent 10 years in the US working there, and I used the healthcare system multiple times. So it is one of the systems that is in a massive need for the efficiency change. That is what we are going to immediately address on this thing. So it is a once in a lifetime opportunity to change the system's efficiency. So only when there is a crisis, people actually rethink the way. So a lot of this long-term thing during the pandemic we could have. So that's what I'm saying. The diagnosis part with the robots, as I walked through the entire process that we are setting up with multiple hospitals, and over the next 2-3 years, we want to bring it to senior care homes and old age homes. That is one of a very, very big passions and very big vision for me. Is this has to serve the elders, because we are going to have 2 billion elders by end of this decade. That is something like our society is not prepared for it. Our government is not prepared for it. So this is something we have to do that. Without that, there's going to be a huge chaos, pain for everyone. So that's what I'm looking at is, from the hospitals, I want to go to senior care homes, being with them, improving the quality of life, both entertaining them as well as being able to take care of their needs. That is a very very big thing. So that's what I'm looking at in the US market, and we could then parallelly do the same things in India too.
Balaji Viswanathan, it was such a pleasure talking to you. Thank you for taking me on this fascinating journey. I've learned so much from you, and for that I am always grateful. Thank you so much for speaking to India Global Business today.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Robinji, for this.